Good morning, dear friends. So I just want to highlight a couple things here on my opening page for my subscriptions for YouTube. So let's just try to gather a couple connections here. So I like this kid, Pedro V, and he has this civilization collapse. This is a test run. So, yes, there's definitely a point where the governments of the world, who are all in on this together, despite these manicured lies that this country's warring against this country. I'm not saying that can't ever happen, but what I'm saying is the people at the top, the leadership, have relationships that are bound within their Masonic, sincerely held religious beliefs and brotherhood. There may be people underneath them, the little people, who they use, so the rich against the poorer, to propagate wars and things like that. But at the top now, there are controllers and puppeteers, and the leadership are often together in communion. I hope that makes sense. And so they like to do these little beta tests, right? So they have an idea of how they want to pull something off, and they want to eventually do it for the whole world. So they'll pick a community, and then they will do live experimentation, like Estonia, for example. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but Estonia has been made the capital of the world for the ease of the aspect of the global desire to find out through experience in a beta test what it looks like to have all of your information together in cyberspace, to basically get your taxes done in a heartbeat, get all your information on one card. They're also doing stuff like that in India as well. So basically, a premise that they want to pull off for the whole entire world, they pick one community, and then they see how this AI reality, this, whatever the topic is that they want to achieve. So there's one place, for example, where it's all a smart city. And so they see how that all functions and works, so they can pick out the bugs of what doesn't work in that society for when they go to do the whole thing global in life. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't really matter what the beta test is. Um, Another example, if you go study in China, they're doing the beta test on having that regime of control through the cameras and the desk camps and the re-education and the censure and all that kind of stuff. So something that they want to see in a global output, they will test it in a particular community to get that real world experience. And on and on and on and on it goes. So they pick a community and they do something to see what it looks like, so that later when they want to do the whole thing globally, they know exactly what things will work, what to anticipate, how human reaction to something was measured, what didn't work well, what worked really well, and so on and so forth. This is just your basic social engineering. I hope that makes sense. Whatever it is that they want to achieve in each community. That said, this is what they're doing here, and we're going to listen to this as well. So they have picked out the community of California, or as some people affectionately call it, California, and they are playing with, see, he even calls it a beta test too. Get out of California, PG&E power outage. So how does the public react when we take away your power? And it's for this little community, but ultimately when it comes down to forcing people into a position of being controlled, well, we're going to take away your power. Would they do that globally? I don't know for sure, but that is the premise. I remember Satan is the slave master here, and he's the one that wants to put through some big, massive control thing. And at the end of it, it's all to get you to worship the way that he wants. So if you don't think that Satan would abuse power and privileges to tie your arm behind your back for those who will be here, you're not aware of who your enemy is. So is that exactly how it's going to go down? I don't know. I just know that there's a principle where they run a beta test somewhere to find out what it'll look like real world when they do it global, right? So I've repeated that a couple times. I think I got the basics of it down. To do a brief overview of what I just see popping up in my subscriptions when you kind of look at it all together, he has, Army Special Forces training. So they're always over here doing this training for another example of what it would look like when you go global with this abuse of power. When you have a pan-communistic, pan-AI, pan-Islamic, pan-techie, pan-communist, pan-Islamic, pan-coexist forced hostile environment of the earth and pan UN. I mean, we could go on and on and on. And pan means all, by the way. I'm sure you know that. All of these groups connecting together to force the world in the direction that it wants to go, which will be to the chaos dragon and Lucifer. So you have this happening. You have Richie from Boston, who I don't agree with everything that he says, but I think he's right on some things. California fires and directed energy weapons. That's another example of a beta test where they were using these weapons, and that's a whole nother train of thought that I don't even want to get into. But you're starting to see this aspect. Why do we have this special army training in our area? Well, because they're going to do something, and they want to know what it looks like when you take people's power away. How do people react, and much more to it. And then this aspect, you've got Falsington over here at Ahavat Ami. He probably could say that a million times better than I could since I don't speak Hebrew. But they are constantly pushing for the coming of this Moshiach, who is not Jesus the Christ. So there's your Antichrist training as he yokes with this entity. Cute hat, by the way, but they have this as above, so below star that has been superimposed to connect the identity of Israel to this Kabbalist, extremely dark, evil, spiritual premise that God and man can yoke, and there's much more that could be said about that, but that's above his head. So you have all of this prep work right here, as well as in many other entities who are bringing about a world change of spirituality for the darkness to bring the Antichrist. So, prepping people from that. You have Americans buried in debt over at the Money GPS. Love them. Pensions and 401ks will be devastated in this crisis. So, they've been nurturing this financial destruction while they're stealing all the wealth out of our money. They've been doing it for 11 years now, and they're getting worse. Much more can be said about that. This guy I don't trust, but I do think that he does mix in truth with lies, and he's definitely not born again. He doesn't understand personal repentance in the slightest, and he hangs with Steve Quayle, which is weird because Steve Quayle purports to be a born again Christian. If I had people in my influence that wanted to hang with me, they'd be hearing about Jesus all the time, unless they couldn't take it anymore or they separated out from me or whatever. So his personal close relationships, I just find it strange that he can maintain a external outside religiosity and not hear about Jesus Christ from Steve all the time. I find that weird, but that's a side point to what I'm talking about. Is we just compile this information from just my subscriptions, and I'm hoping to hurry and get through this so that we can go and check out what's going on with Pedro V. But one way or another, whether it's this video or the next one, we will get to that as we just continue peppering through and looking at all the precepts of this insanity that is making for ultimately the flipping of the world to the evil one. Okay, so you have this hellhole of disease and communist indifference within the organization of the Californian government, where you have disease burgeoning, you have people, the police have to dedicate a portion of their task force to going and cleaning up disease infested feces because there's so much of that happening. And this is um, nurturing a scenario where disease, really bad disease, stuff that should be well contained, that the Bible gave us information in. Hello, Leviticus. Now, that's not the funnest book in the world to read, but you can't say that God didn't warn you about infectious disease and many other things. The feasts are also, side note, in Leviticus 23 as well. So there's a lot of information that these professionals are purposefully ignoring because they want to create a scenario where it becomes a biological weapon. And oh no, maybe we need the UN to step in and help us because we don't know what we're doing, right? All this faked lies. Okay, so we could have a point of entry for the UN with this. And notice California, California. So, what are these people nurturing? A big problem is coming. Economic fear rising, consumer distrust of banks surges. Not sure on the grammar on that, but that's okay. I mess up on grammar all the time too. Spending pullback amid stagnant wages. So boom, bear, bust is another channel that I go to. So he agrees with him on different points. Then you have here Paul Martin, whom I also don't necessarily trust, and more massive UN troop movements. So we've been reporting that to you as others have been reporting to you that there is something happening with the organization of the UN who are already here among us. What are they doing now? So that's a 15-minute one. We'll one way or another get to that, or I'll put links in. Uh, we'll get to it so you have a better, more clear answer on these particular trees. Right now, we're kind of just trying to cover the broad view of the forest of hell, of, of this tactical garbage being put down upon us, and trying to derive the bigger picture of a setup as we just kind of look over these comments. Turkish military tries to free ISIS. Boy, I hope that's not true. Those are some really, really bad people, and a lot could be said about that. So we'll hyper focus in on this.
Blackouts in the largest planned power outage in state history. It's just hours away from right now. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tony Lopez.
And I'm Adrienne Moore. PG&E plans to cut the lights to 500,000 customers across Northern California. Those outages are happening between midnight and 4 a.m.
Now, portions of 34 counties will be impacted if fully implemented. Some 800,000 homes and businesses will be without power, and the outages could last for days.
Well, it's 9 o'clock here in Hawaii, but in California, it's midnight, which means planned power outages could start any minute now. These outages could affect nearly 1 million people for the next few days. Kimberly Speakman has more on what's happening. Kimberly?
Lauren, Bridget, I spoke to a Northern California resident who says he was surprised by the decision to turn off the power, and he as well as others have had to work quickly to prepare. People were heading to stores stocking up on food, ice, propane, and anything else that may get them through the upcoming power outage.
So their refrigerators are going to be off, and it's just your big deal now to have to deal with how are you going to keep your meat frozen and your milk cold and prevent disease and bacteria and things growing in your food. And this could be for a few days, and you have to deal with this. How are you going to help your kids? This is evil. Okay, he's going to call it beta test. That's fine. I think it's beta, but that's okay. That's okay.
This power outage is simply a beta test to see how people will react when they do finally shut off all the areas that they don't want communicating, so that they can take over without help or interference from anyone else in the nation. It is how the world control will be implemented, sections at a time, because they know they can't just take control of all the entire US without a fight from the masses.
I agree. Oh, yeah, great. U.S. Chinese tariffs. American workers could suffer at U.S. ports. So, yeah, Trump is doing this on purpose. I don't think people get that. Okay, join me for part 2 because we're going to talk about this Army Special Forces training. Something's up.